So this assessment just helps you understand what your behavioral drives might be. And ultimately, it answers that question of why do I do the things I do within a workplace setting? I think ultimately where PI differentiates itself is the science and validity is incredible, by the way. It's been around since 1955 and was originally created in the Army Corps of Engineers. And with that, it's just so rooted in science, but it's also not just a, hey, here you go. Like you said, here's your score. As a leader, right? I'm not going to be able to change somebody. I'm not going to be able to change their, style, their approach. But what I can do is adjust my style, my approach, my communication to them.
Systems work. People fail. Welcome to InsureMark's Advisor Mentorship Podcast with Vice President Jeremy Hauser.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Advisor Mentorship Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Hauser. We talk all things for entrepreneurial advisors, leaders, business owners, and lately we've been having a lot of conversations around operations. We all know that's the key to success of business is not just leadership, but also good operations and systems. Very excited about this conversation. We actually have Kellie Fern, who is the Director of Business Operations and Development at the Predictive Group. How are we doing today, Kellie?
I'm doing well, Jeremy. Thank you so much for asking and having me here.
It is an honor having you. And actually, before we dive into some questions, Kellie has a unique role. So she actually works here with us at Simplicity InsureMark on behalf of our leadership team. So this will be a fun episode as we dive in to a little bit of some of the evolutions and growth of our organization. And thanks to companies like Kellie to help us when it comes to the flow of business. So before we get into the skeletons in the closets of our company, can you give us a little bit about your background on what you do and a little bit about your company?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeremy. Well, it's funny you already started with that. Obviously, I love the fact that I'm able to support your business and InsureMark and be a strategic partner with the use of the Predictive Index. So our firm, the Predictive Group, which this should be fun, this episode, trying to have a distinction between the two, right? But our firm, the Predictive Group, has been in business for about 30 years at this point, which is amazing, with using tools like the Predictive Index to support organizations and ultimately help businesses put data to their people strategy, right? So we always believe that, and our mission is we're helping businesses achieve what we call a better work, better world, by using objective data to solve those problems. So we support businesses all across the globe with, again, just putting objective data into what some say is their hardest challenges on the day-to-day, their people, and solving some of their people problems. So what I do personally is, I don't even know where to begin. I do everything from just operations on the business front, but ultimately what I'm the most passionate about, Jeremy, as you have seen probably, is working with organizations to really unlock the power of tools and what that can look like for their business. So,
yeah, and I know. So the company's been around about 30 years. You've been in this type of role itself. You said like a little over a decade or so that you've been doing this.
Yeah, coming up on a decade. So the role has definitely evolved throughout this time. I'm super blessed that I got into this business really early in my career, and at that point, I've, really had the chance to be within this business and see the different aspects of it in different facets and different ways over a decade. So, oddly enough, I know we'll be getting into the Predictive Index. Oddly enough, I was first introduced to, PI and this idea of assessment tools and data. When I was young, I was actually around the age of 17 to 18. My father had used this tool, particularly within his own business. And he brought it home with him one day and was trying to figure out why my sister and I were so different. Like any father with two teenage daughters would want, is some help. So he actually had me take it, as well as my sister. And boy, were we completely opposite, which obviously wasn't shocking. It was more validating. But at that point, it just sparked my passion for understanding human behavior, right? I know at an age I was able to kind of have this aha moment myself and see how we can use, tools like this to help us understand ourselves and others, because we're just all different. So coming up on a decade now, which is crazy.
And actually, I didn't know that part. So that's interesting, because like I would lean more towards the side of what your dad did.
Yeah.
That's actually a very smart idea.
I'll help you out with it. We'll
Yeah.
connect offline on that one too.
And what's interesting is, and so you referenced PI. So doing this long enough, you've probably seen a lot of different companies. You've met a lot of people. People's a huge volatile scenario when it comes to businesses, when you're dealing with people. So traditionally, what do you think, in your perspective, what do you think people find out about themselves, and what does the predictive index test, what does that bring out in that individual?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, you hear that all the time, that the people can be the most, like, I think, just to quote what you shared, the most volatile piece of business. But it's actually, crazy to think that without the people, right? Do we even have a business, right? Do we actually have a product? Do we have a way to go to market and success? So, when we think of the predictive index and kind of what it is, at first, the single biggest thing that people discover by taking the predictive index assessment is a deeper sense of self-awareness, right? And there's tons of different tools out there, different ways that people can better understand themselves. I mean, but at its core with PI, it takes less than 6 minutes to complete. So ultimately, it's so interesting to firsthand see, and what I get to experience on the day to day, how something as simple as a 6-minute assessment can be, what I like to say, a catalyst, or just give people a profound, deeper, sense of self-discovery and who they are, right? So when someone takes the assessment, my goal is for them to first, understand that it's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. It's just who you are, right? All of us are just innately hardwired a different way. So this assessment just helps you understand what your behavioral drives might be. And ultimately it answers that question of, why do I do the things I do within a workplace setting? So, a lot of people think they're self-aware. And, one of my favorite, studies that we teach, even with different clients we have the opportunity to work with, is the fact that people believe they're self-aware, but at the end of the day, are they really? So there's a great TED Talk and study done by an organizational psychologist from Harvard Business Review. Her name's Tasha Eurich, which, Jeremy, I know your PI profile, my PI profile. We're probably fans of TED Talks, or, getting to the point on things. So it's about 17 minutes long, so I can share it with you. But what Tasha Eurich was able to do was actually go around and do a 5-year study across a group of 5,000 different participants, different leaders, top performers. And she found, at the start of the study, that 95% of everyone said they were self-aware, right? They believed at their core they're like, I know who I am at work. I get my style. But actually 10 to 15% really were, which,
wow,
I think when you hear that, I don't know about yourself, but it's just eye-opening, right? That it can't be assumed. So going back to your original question, ultimately at the start of it, it's a self-awareness tool, right? The assessment is going to yield a understanding of, okay, what are my core drives? Again, it's not just a score, but it's data that's giving me an understanding of my core behavioral drives, what I need at work, right? And ultimately it's measuring things like your level of patience, right? Your drive for social interaction. Some of us like talking to people, some of us don't, and that's okay, whichever side of the coin you're on, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need all within business. So it's just giving us that insight that ultimately helps us understand ourselves. But I think where you and I have seen it firsthand within your business is how you then can use it as a business tool, right?
Help your clients renovate, reinforce, and take pride in their financial home. North American has some exciting news. They just launched a powerful new resource designed to help make client conversations easier, more engaging, and more impactful. Discover the blueprint for organizing, protecting, and upgrading your financial life so you can build a lasting legacy and approach retirement with confidence. It's called the North American Financial Home Makeover Campaign. It includes a magazine, a microsite, and an online client prospect assessment. Pretty cool. These resources will help you spot retirement gaps and opportunities, build more long lasting trust, and start retirement conversations that really matter with prospects and clients. To access this amazing resource, reach out to our team or go to www.insuremarkamp.com/Jay Hauser and click on Learn More. And actually, I want to talk about that for a second. Wow, that's a pretty drastic, it's like the 80-20 rule almost. So 95, you reference people are self-aware when they are asked, do you have a self-awareness of yourself?
Yeah.
Yes, but then it falls off 10-15. So for the business owners, are you saying approximately the ones that you guys talk to, about only 10% to 15% of those people are even aware that that's who they are after the results come about?
Yeah, no, and I think what's interesting when someone gets the results back, typically, and I know, Jeremy, I don't even think we had anybody say much in that session we did there. Typically, it's an aha moment, right? Where people often say, oh, that's why I'm always the one who volunteers to lead the project, or now I understand why I get drained after a full day of meetings. And so there's not necessarily pushback, I want to say, on like when somebody gets a result. But it's more of, think of self-awareness, especially when I think of leaders and business owners, there's a lot of pressure, right? There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of intense moments. There's maybe a stressful moment where naturally as human beings, we're just going to revert to our natural tendencies and style, right? And I think self-awareness, which then leads into that idea of emotional intelligence, right, is at its core understanding, okay, in those high pressure situations, push comes to shove, how do I make sure that I'm adjusting, right? How do I make sure maybe I know that my low patience that I'm naturally hardwired with in this moment is probably not the best thing I should probably be aware of how I should flex that a bit to get the best outcome in this moment. So it's not necessarily stating that the leaders come in, what is that then? Like 90 or 85 to 90% of the leaders go, oh, I had no idea any of this about myself. It's more of, them in those moments of self-awareness, able to adjust, which takes a lot of work, right? It takes a lot of work for us to kind of adjust who we are and how we're naturally hardwired.
It's interesting. And I think maybe it's one of those where within our team specifically, we've done maybe some in the past too. So it's almost where we've done some of these other systems that are out there. Nothing wrong with them.
No,
We're
yeah.
huge fans of this one, and I'll talk about why here in a little bit. But going back to like the leadership role, the self-awareness for the leader. So how important is this type of resource when it comes to designing a team? Because everything can't just be one person. So talk about a little bit of how PI works when it comes to the business owner designing their team and hiring people.
Oh my gosh, how long do we have for that question, right? It actually truly, and again, I'm not just saying this because this is my world, right? And what I do day in and day out is help business leaders, help organizations understand that they can take the guessing game out of their people strategy, right? They don't have to spend hours and hours of time trying to build relationships and understand people. And, there's tools that can fast track the most, like we talked about, volatile and complicated part of business, which is the people side. But it is so important to use, I just believe, data when you're building a team, because leaders can be, all leaders, all individuals are hardwired a certain way, right? And what we find is the best leaders aren't necessarily hardwired a certain way and have the same traits. They're skilled at building a diverse and comprehensive team around them. And, we've already talked about the value of self-awareness. Again, self-awareness is, if you just read tons of studies out there, there's even a really big fan of business books. There's another great business book called First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. Again, all of these just always come back to the number one trait amongst all successful leaders and performers is they know their strengths, but they know their blind spots. And, when it comes to how PI or a resource like behavioral data, like you said, there's tons of them out there. I'll never speak poorly on another like you, because if we had a more self-aware world, I think we're in good shape, but that's probably for a whole nother discussion point from today's. But again, having that ability to be self-aware and having that ability to know, okay, how do I build a complementary team around myself as a business leader? That's important, right? So the predictive index gives you the data and the answer to the who question when it comes to building that complementary team around you. So you can see behavioral patterns of your existing members, identify maybe, do I have gaps on the team currently? Maybe you're starting a business. I think, Jeremy, maybe we're in a point of starting a business, starting down that entrepreneurial journey. Let's take the guessing game out of it. What is my strengths? Where as a business leader am I going to need some coverage? Not necessarily just role specific coverage, but strengths within the business to make sure we've got, detail orientation. Maybe your team currently has a bunch of big picture people who hate details. You can see that clearly with using a resource like this and hire someone then that may fix that gap, that might be more methodical, might be more precise. So, ultimately, when I think of the importance, I think it's almost so important. It should be a non-negotiable way to look at, building your teams and building businesses. It's like building a sports team, right? And we actually have the fortunate opportunity to work with a ton of sports teams using this data. You don't just fill it with a bunch of quarterbacks, right? You need running backs, you need defensive linemen, you need special teams. So PI is just giving you that blueprint for your business team overall. So that's kind of the cheesy analogy I like to share from time to time.
That's very, very smart. And I think that does stick pretty well. And you referenced something on behavioral data. So what is that?
Yeah. So behavioral data is in essence just objective information about how people are hardwired. Now you've already mentioned it. There's tons of different assessment tools or different, ways that we can uncover how somebody might be hardwired. Now, when I speak about behavioral data in this conversation and in relation to my tool that we use, which is the Predictive Index, mm-hmm. that is rooted science-wise in how you're hardwired to work, how you're hardwired to show up in a workplace setting. We've already mentioned it, right? But high pressure situation, push comes to shove. What are my natural tendencies going to be? Am I going to be more independent? Am I going to be more collaborative? Am I going to be more social? Am I going to be more private? Right? The list goes on and on. So when we think about behavioral data, in the bigger sense, it's just not about skills and experience or personality, because personality can change and can, evolve. It's about the innate hardwired drives that influence how a person communicates, makes decisions, and interacts with others. Mm-hmm. Is kind of the way I always like to share that.
Are you tired of seeing your clients' renewal rates going down? Maybe your customer started out with a 5% cap, and over the years, it has been cut down to 2%. Sound familiar? Lock in guaranteed rates on Prosperity Life Group's newest FIA, Path Pro Series, an A-excellent company now with a 16% premium bonus with no fee. PLG's Path Pro Series has you covered. You can find Prosperity's perfect renewal rate scorecard and more at www.prosperitylifearc.com. That's prosperitylifearc.com. And it is interesting because, and I read I listen to a lot of Audible books. And something you did say earlier is pretty relevant. And I marked it down, talking about how people always fall to their systems, especially as business owners, on the volatile times. You just never know. So really it does come back to like who you are to your core when
Yeah.
you're in challenging times of where you're at. And so I'm curious. So when you actually go through these PI scores with an actual company, what are some of the common results that you do see when you're with these companies?
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, Jeremy, I love that you said, almost like the PI is giving you that system for how, ourselves show up at work.
Hmm.
And I think we'll get to it in a little bit too, and definitely want to make sure I share that PI is not the whole story of how somebody is going to show up in the workplace setting, right? There's so many different elements that impact who we are at work, right? There's different things like our values, our mindset, our resume, our education. So
Our work
I definitely
ethic.
do just,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
right. And so I think that's also a big piece of, what our work is. And to your point, like understanding who somebody is at their core and what their profile might be and what their strengths are is important, right? We've talked about that a lot, but it's not the whole story. So I think before even thinking about whenever I, work with a company or look at a team, right? That's the fun part. Like what I've been able to do with Jeremy, you and your team. I always like to remember that the whole person shows up to work. So, traditionally I would say, when I'm brought in and we're kind of, better understanding a team that's currently in place, the dynamic, ultimately every organization can look different, right? So there might not be a one answer to your question there because they could be different for a multitude of reasons. Maybe it's the tenure of the company. I think you even said it as well. Maybe they've done something similar to PI before. But one of the most common things, well, there's a couple common things, but one of the biggest common things I see from time to time, if let's say we're just looking at, a team chart and kind of how the team's hardwired and how Jeremy shows up and how Jeremy's peers show up and the leader, sometimes, and this actually I don't think was the case when we were with your team, so that's the good news here. But sometimes we see what's called, or what I like to call a leadership echo, right? So what that means is I'll get kind of the PI results back from the organization or the department or the team, and I'll see kind of this common trend where maybe a founder or a senior leader has hired people very similar to them, right? So we'll look at kind of the overall makeup of the size. And again, it might be different due to size of the organization. And there's a lot of similar trends just in profiles.
And so when you reference that, you mean like, so I got this form here. So like they're literally, because I know you mentioned earlier you're a captain. So those that are, so if you actually are watching this on Spotify or YouTube, you can actually see what I'm holding up here. So there's multiple things. So you're saying that the leader might hire people very similar to them. So that's a common thing.
Yeah. And because there's 17 different PI profiles out there.
Okay.
We call them reference profiles. And for those that aren't familiar with Predictive Index, it's not necessarily going to put people in a box. And it's not necessarily saying, if you're a captain and I'm a captain, we're going to act the same way, right? That's kind of why that whole person showing up to work, the different elements that impact who we are matters. But, classically, if they're not using PI, so let's say to your point of we're coming in, we're going to have the entire organization or team take the predictive index assessment, understand to your, what you showed there, Jeremy, what profile do they really fall within? Yeah, not all the time, but one of the common things I will see from time to time is just that leadership echo, or kind of the fact that there might be a team of 4 captains because maybe the leader was a captain, right? Or maybe they're in similar profiles around a captain. So that's just because, and it's not, because the leader, was trying to do this. It's just a natural, I don't know, Jeremy, if you've even seen this in your work, it's just a natural human tendency to, connect with people easily and quickly that sound like you, that maybe have similar, styles of you. Maybe in the interview, they're saying things like, oh, I'm really, I focus hard and I really, dig deep and I like working with others. And maybe you as the leader, the hiring manager going, wow, that sounds fantastic. That's what I would do. Right. So,
I love the words.
I think that's a common thing that we'll see if they're not using a tool like objective behavioral data within their hiring practices or their development practices like PI can do is, we just naturally might stack the team with people that are similar to us. And it's just it's an unconscious bias. Ultimately, people might not even notice they're doing it. So.
Selling the Ibexus FIA Plus and Wealth Defender FIAs just got even easier. They have increased street comp by 1% for clients aged 71 and up, putting more in your pocket while helping retirees grow and protect their wealth. Plus, Ibexus has raised participation rates so you can offer even more value and upside potential. It's a win-win for your clients and your business. For more information, go to www.insuremarkamp.com/jhauser and click on Learn More. Don't miss this opportunity to boost your earnings and deliver stronger solutions. The thing that was so fascinating, and this is why honestly, I'm a huge fan of the team that y'all have and what y'all do, is it's actually broken down to where you're not just like a number. Like some of the others. I know we've done Kobe, we've done Enneagram, we've done all the other ones, which nothing wrong with the strategy. But I mean, what was different with you guys is that you actually were able to show the analysis amongst your team and ways to phrase certain things. So you're basically teaching us how to communicate better as leaders. And that was like the first thing I saw of like, this is incredible. The fact, because I think when we actually did our exercise and we put our teams up there, and a lot of people had people on the right or people on the left of their stuff. And then I had like the pie chart of everybody was in every section. So I got to be like a chameleon. But it was interesting because it gave you guidance of how to do it. It's not like, well, you're just in a crummy situation, but maybe it's a great situation because you got a great team of people that do all things different.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, and to that point, and that's why I fell in love with PI too, to be honest. Well, one, again, similar to you, Jeremy, because that's where it's fun with PI, by the way, other people's profiles, so we can pick at each other. But with that being said, my natural tendencies, I'm super impatient, right? So just the fact that the predictive index alone was a quick, easy assessment. But I think ultimately where PI differentiates itself is it's the science and validity is incredible. By the way, it's been around since 1955 and was originally created in the Army Corps of Engineers. And with that, it's just so rooted in science, but it's also not just a, hey, here you go. Like you said, here's your score, right? Go figure it out. Well, it actually is at its core, yes, a self-awareness tool helping people. We've talked about it, understand themselves. It doesn't come natural sometimes. We have to work at it. We have to use tools. But ultimately, it's how do we then use it in a business setting, right? How do we actually help then organizations go, okay, people data is actually a way that we can optimize our talent and get the business results we're looking for. So absolutely, there's no perfect profile. There's no perfect team. But I think you brought up another interesting point there, Jeremy, with what you just shared, going back to that question about what we see when maybe you bring someone like myself in, we're measuring a team, is probably the other common trend I would see, kind of the flip side of the coin, is what I like to call kind of a strategic friction case, which is maybe where there's a team or a business is, looking to either execute some sort of business strategy, or maybe it's a sales team, maybe it's an accounting team. So there is definitive type of work that is needed to be done.
So it's tough to have ownership of like what direction we're going. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. Right. But the strategic friction is also just the fact that the team's collective behavioral patterns is either maybe in direct conflict with the work that needs to be done or with each other. Right. The fact that, going back to that other question you asked about why is, important to use a resource like this to build a team. Well, at its core, we talked about it. We don't want everybody to be the same way as us, right? We want to bring different thoughts to the table, but that strategic friction can cause challenges if it's unknown, right? If you have a team, like you just talked about, Jeremy, that's all over the map, it's not a bad thing. Now it's kind of like, okay, what's the strategy and what's the team goal here? But the fact that without using PI, like you just said, you're probably a chameleon, right? You're like trying to go in different directions all the time because everyone's different. Everyone's got different styles. So I think that's another big piece of it. You know, when I see like another common trend is it just shows you and like illuminates the strengths of others and maybe where there are differences on a team that can cause, just because we're humans and we're complex, just natural friction of working with somebody that acts differently, communicates differently, right? It just gives you that whole, oh, so that makes sense, right? That moment where you now have that understanding.
Mm-hmm. And I think something you mentioned earlier. So like when is the right time? So like I know it's like, so a lot of the listeners to this, they might have one or two people in their office. So it's not necessarily they've been around for a while. They just started hiring people. We have some individuals that have had multiple staff members for years. They have like up to 19 people on staff. So it's one of those like, when does your company, like what are the good times? Like when's the good or right time to get involved with something like this for an organization?
Oh gosh. Well, if you even have yourself about to start a business, I would start there. Like going
That's
back
true.
to that, like, you know, what the best of the best leaders and business owners do out there is they understand themselves, they understand their strengths, and they understand where their, you know, their challenges may fall as a business leader, right? I actually err on the side of, if you have a smaller team, I think this data is even so much more crucial because there's nowhere to hide, right? If you don't have strong team collaboration, cohesion, understanding, trust, right? Valuing the differences in one another's styles. And I hope on a small team you have differences, by the way, because again, going back to that point, having no coverage if you're even a small team. So to answer your question at that point, I would start even if you're just out there by yourself, right? Knowing like I'm going to grow my business or scale my business. Now, of course, typically as you get more and more employees, things become more and more complicated. So, you know, typically our team, just for lack of better terms, gets the call, right?
Mm-hmm.
At one or two critical points in the business. It's either they're in a moment of crisis, and maybe they're, you know, experiencing high employee turnover, maybe a toxic culture, maybe they've had a series of bad hires. And we get that call where the leader is just exhausted. They're trying to figure out, why aren't our teams working together? Why can't we retain the talent? We're spending so much time and energy finding people,
Yeah.
thinking we found that silver bullet. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, we're like, what happened here? Right. So that's when we would get the call. The other critical time, honestly, and it sounds like, Jeremy, just based off what you just shared, is with, you know, growing organizations where they're in what I like to call a proactive time, right? They're proactive strategic growth time. This is where, you know, and again, many of your listeners might be in this point based off what you just shared, where they're looking to scale, right? Maybe they know, maybe I want to grow my business. I can't just do it with myself and one other person. I need to, you know, grow and add more humans to reach more individuals. Maybe they're undergoing, and this might be different, but you know, another reason our services will come in at this proactive time is maybe it's a merger or an acquisition, or they're planning some sort of major strategic shift in the market. So when I think of this critical point or this time, it's more of businesses asking, how do we build the right team to, you know, to reach our goals? How do we integrate cultures if we're combining businesses together? How do we develop our next generation of leaders? So, that's going to be really where we typically are coming in, is in those two critical points, but there's no perfect time, right? Like I mentioned at the beginning, you could be a team of one, a team of two. I mean, my business is a team of 4 and 5 people. And I think it can get complicated if we didn't have PI, because the smaller the group, again, like I said, the less place to hide. And I think it's important that if you are a small and nimble and resourceful team, you got to have diversity of different strengths and different profiles on the team, and as long as it aligns to what you're doing. So
introducing Eclipse Mark, fixed index annuities from Standard Insurance Company. Built for growth and with client value at its core, the accumulation focused Eclipse Mark offers interest crediting options that include a guaranteed fixed account rate for the length of the surrender charge period and a duo growth index option, get this, which credits a guaranteed earnings rate in down markets or index earnings plus a guaranteed earnings rate up to a competitive cap in flat or positive markets. Available with a 10-year surrender charge schedule up to age 80 or the 5-year version up to age 90. Eclipse Mark also offers a vesting premium bonus option up to 12%, extended guaranteed rate periods, and 15% penalty-free liquidity, giving you the flexibility to address a wide range of client goals. Discover what sets Eclipse Mark apart. Visit Legacy Marketing Group at www.legacynet.com or contact us today. And I mean, you're building it the right way, because at the end of the day, too, if you're looking for, I mean, it's just going to be, I guess, I don't know why it's popped in my head, more money, more problems. So you might as well build it the right way. But I did, and you mentioned actually, so yeah, and that's another amazing service that y'all offer. So literally this summer, you came out to Austin and you were at our SLT retreat. Which was awesome. So we got an opportunity to dive a little more into the data of the bones of our organization, the people. But something I did write down that I wanted to ask you about, because I thought it was a pretty interesting conversation we had. It was around TOT, T-O-T. So that was talent optimizing tool. So what is that?
Technically, talent optimization is what the Predictive Index has coined as like the way that they're going to describe what the Predictive Index is, right? It is a talent optimization tool. And really, I think what's interesting is you already brought up that term of like systems, but what it is it's a framework, right? It's a framework for how organizations, can have a framework for their people strategy. So it's a new way of thinking, really, ultimately, this idea of talent optimization. It's a new way of thinking, okay, how can people drive business results? Most companies, we find they have a clear business strategy. Well, we hope they have a business strategy or goals they're trying to achieve. But they don't often have the people strategy to match that. So that's where PI, being what we call a quote unquote talent optimization tool, comes in. It's a framework and a discipline that helps you align your people with your strategy to get the goal, to get the business results you're looking for. So, with it, it's kind of like think of it like an architect's blueprint for your company's workforce. It helps you analyze the behavioral needs and the business strategy, and then assess whether your current team has the right mix of behaviors to reach the goals you're trying to achieve. Maybe it's a sales team, maybe it's a finance team, right? But it's about going back to that last question you asked. It's what point is your business in? It's about being proactive instead of reactive. Instead of hiring a person just for a job, you're designing the perfect team to execute the business objective. Ultimately how we're doing that with Predictive Index being a talent optimization tools, it's not just within hiring and selection. It's not just, like other tools out there for your leadership development, right? It's not just for, okay, do I have the right team today? Is it diverse? Is it too diverse for the goals or the job we have to do? So a lot can go into it. I think ultimately it's not just about putting the right people in the right seats, which you might hear that phrase from time to time. It's about optimizing your talent as a whole. So people are engaged, right? People are in roles that they naturally enjoy, right? They're not having to show up every day and change themselves. It's about developing your leaders, because sometimes, I don't know if you've seen this, Jeremy, that people get put in leadership positions and because they're really good and skilled at their, previous role. And now all of a sudden they have to manage people and they're like, I don't even know how to do that, right? I've never been taught or given those skills. It's about developing that area of your business for your talent strategy. And it's about teams, right? It's about culture, building teams that are high performing. And, I was going to say this when you actually brought up the mo money, mo problems is, have you ever seen the movie Moneyball?
Oh, of course. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. How to design the A's. Yes.
That's exactly, again, I'm a big sports fan, so
Mhm.
I've like mentioned that now a couple times in the conversation, but that's just my simplest way to put it. If you've seen Moneyball, right? They aren't just putting somebody on first base or on the pitcher mound or as a catcher. They're actually based on data going, okay, who's the right fit? And then how do we take that team knowing that they're going to be different because every job's different. What it takes to play first base, second base, third base is different, right? Catcher, outfield, but then understanding that it's not going to come natural for that team to be cohesive and not have friction because they're different, right? So talent optimization, I know this is probably a larger answer to your question there is, a lot of people might think it's just about putting the right person in the right seat. It's just so much more than that, right? I think it's ultimately though at that end goal of using data to not guess at how are we motivating our humans? How are we building our teams? And ultimately the goal is to create a more engaged workforce, right? I mean, gosh, I don't know if, you read any of the annual review, the annual reports from Gallup, but the statistic today on employee engagement is 31%
Jeez.
of employees within the United States are engaged at work, which is the lowest level we've seen in a decade. Which I share that not to be scary by any means, but that means that 70% of the workforce is not engaged. They're showing up doing the bare minimum. They're unhappy, right? So where we're using talent optimization is we're helping put data into all facets of the people strategy. And it's ultimately to make sure, again, businesses are getting the goals that they want and it's saving them time and effort and keeping employees engaged. So
that's an interesting stat right there. I wrote that down. 70% of workforce not engaged. Really just putting the best people in the right spot to succeed. And I think what your company does a good job of is, I think, from personal stuff to business, it's all the same. It comes down to one word, and that's communication. So I think that's where you guys have the right resources and tools to help leaders have better communication. And that's why, my endorsement to you guys is
well,
because
thank you. We love
it,
that.
it
We appreciate
teaches,
it.
it teaches more of the communication component, which as a Maverick, that's not easy. So it is good to be told kind of like, hey, phrase this saying instead of saying what you're about to say, because that's absolutely not how you talk to that person. Say it in this manner, even though it's against your nature of like, I will never say that, but the results are better when you word it that way.
You know my phrase, you heard it so much is we can't change another human. I know I threw out that question. You probably remember from the session.
Yep.
I asked that and I go, well, in a workplace setting, again, you can think you changed your partner or your kids or whatever have you, but we can't change others, right? And I think what you just mentioned there, Jeremy, going back to that, what is talent optimization? It's not just putting someone in the right seats. It's also understanding as a leader, right? I'm not going to be able to change somebody. I'm not going to be able to change their, style, their approach. But what I can do is adjust my style, my approach, my communication to them to possibly get those best outcomes. And that's just what we see helping leaders. And just even if you're not a leader, right? Maybe you're just working with another person, knowing we got to win the game, we got to get the business results. We probably have to work together well in order to do that. So it just gives you that roadmap to absolutely communication. And we all just have our different styles. It just goes back to self-awareness, right? It goes back to what is my natural style and how do I adjust that to others? And you can work with someone for 10, 15, 20 years and probably pick up on that. But why waste that much time, right? Just using behavioral data, it gives you the roadmap, right? It gives you that best chance at not wasting all that time, right? And just getting to the root of who somebody is. So.
And you guys don't do necessarily, is it all the time or is it, because obviously we had you come in and come to us. So usually is it with all of y'all's companies or do some people just take the tests, get the data and run the show? Or walk through like a example of what that process is. Let's say they bring you guys on. Do you always go out to their team? How engaged are you?
Well, I think a couple things, and it honestly goes back to that term talent optimization, right? And talent optimization is where essentially, depending on the organizations we work with, we first diagnose what are the needs, right? What are maybe some, going back to the why would somebody use your tool? Well, what critical point are they at? Is it a proactive point? Is it the point where we talked about maybe they're struggling a bit? So I think initially it'll always be different for every business, right? Some businesses are really bleeding on the talent acquisition side. They're spending so much time and resources on hiring. Maybe we'll focus there first. Some organizations are really struggling, like everything you just talked about. They have just a toxic culture. They're having teams that are not teams, but leaders that are just driving their teams away.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that leader lacks self-awareness. Maybe it's because they don't have the roadmap to understand that their team is completely different. But some organizations, and I like to say that when I even came down to Austin and we had that session, I would say that's a common thing for organizations that are proactive minded, where they understand and they value the fact that, their humans are the way that they're going to, be a successful business. And they find that having those team dynamic, team discovery sessions it's not necessarily because you guys needed it. And it wasn't like oh my gosh, we're not working well together, but it's more of a, how do we take a proactive approach to better understanding us as a team, right? And so I will say across the board, just in a general sense, bringing teams together and helping them understand each other is absolutely one of the main fundamentals of why organizations will use PI. But again, it goes back to what does the business need? Is it, they're struggling on hiring, they're struggling on leadership development, they're struggling on team dynamics, so on and so forth. So we come in and diagnose what, and it might be all of it, by the way, which, I mean, my profile being a captain's profile similar to yours, I love that challenge when it's all of it. So it's just different for businesses. But at the end of the day, we want the organization firing on all cylinders using PI. So.
And I know, and I mean, a lot of the guys, the girls that may listen to this episode and they're thinking to themselves, where am I in my organization? I can tell you firsthand, it does actually give some guidance, especially if you're in the build, the grow, or even the scale model.
Yeah.
Just to have a basis, a third party group is always, it tells you your blind spots. But I know we're coming up here as we're wrapping up. Is there anything we missed or any words of wisdoms from you today?
Yeah, no, I think honestly, Jeremy, just thank you and for the time. And I just love working with your organization. So this has been super fun for me. And of course, knowing our profiles, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even look at the time. I've just been chatting away here. But no, I will say this, just knowing your audience, I think hopefully we were able to just bring to light the idea of behavioral data and how there is objective data. And I love speaking to, an audience like yours, because I know business wise, you use a lot of data even for your own businesses, right? Think of it as people data. But I want to make sure to 100% kind of bring back that point of the predictive index and using some sort of tool absolutely will help you understand a person's drives. It'll help you understand what demands for the different positions you have. It's giving you the ability to have a people strategy. Absolutely. But it's not the whole story, right? So each of us, as we show up to work day in and day out, we're a mix of our genetics, which is what PI measures, our head. But each of us also has our own hearts, our own values, our own interests, our own mindsets, right? Our own resume, our own skills and our experience. And I think what we have to remember is, and what I teach with different organizations I work with is the mindset and the values that can change. Our resume can change. I mean, we hope our resume changes over time. What doesn't change, yeah, maybe, hopefully. What doesn't change is who we are at our core, right? And I think that's the fundamental piece of PI is not going to be your silver bullet. It's not going to, be the end all be all. It's another piece of data into really being strategic of understanding how people show up at work. And that just is, if you're out there starting a business, like you said, about to scale a business, it's giving you that roadmap to take the guessing game out of it. And it also helps you understand that I can teach you how to do a job. I can't teach you to love doing it. And so we're big fans of ideas of, I can upskill you, I can teach you it, but I can't teach you to have the strengths that we need within our business as we're starting out. So I'd just love to leave your listeners with that. And hopefully, it's been insightful for them to understand that there is tools out there that can save you time, energy, money on making mishires and bad culture, just to get you in the right, what I like to call stack the odds in your favor. Right. But we're super excited, obviously, to be partnering with your organization. And if anybody else has questions, I'm always here to help, since I'm a part of the InsureMark family.
And where do they go to find you?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn, Kellie Fern, or you could go to www.predictivegroup.com. So it's PREDICTIVE group.com. So, we've got lots of more information. You can even click there. If you want to try a PI yourself, you can actually take one from our website, thepredictivegroup.com, and happy to take you through your own results. If you're out there a team of one, just remember it's still equally as important to know yourself. So
I love that. And we'll put those links in the bio of this episode, and couldn't say it better. I'll definitely leave it at that. Leaders can't teach you to love the job. I love that. So thank you, Kellie, for your time, and also thank you to the listener for tuning in to this week's episode of the Advisor Mentorship Podcast. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite listening device. Connect with us on LinkedIn, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Jeremy Hauser AMP. And as you share this episode with a friend and a colleague, remember, in a world full of betas, be an alpha.